Whatever happened to baby Jane? To seek the answer to that question, we will follow a man plotting a murder. Highly specialized work. But Robert Aldrich has considerable experience in such matters. He has a dozen successful pictures to his credit. His stars are Bette Davis and Joan Crawford. The scene: an Italianate villa in a once fashionable section of Los Angeles. Its halls, once crowded with the bright, the beautiful, and the celebrated, now echo only to hectic whispers, the insistent call of a buzzer better left unanswered. A telephone that has become an object of fear. A supper tray that will not be touched. A window barred against the world. A hammer. A mute scrawl crying for help. From these elements, director Aldrich has fashioned a motion picture with a curious title: Whatever Happened to Baby Jane? Bette Davis is Jane Hudson. Joan Crawford is Blanche Hudson.
Hey there, child stars, actors, rivals, and life-size dolls.
Welcome to another episode of What Happens in the Crypt.
Today, we are talking about the 1962 film, Whatever Happened to Baby Jane.
And this movie is based off of a book that by the same name that came out by Henry Farrell.
A quick synopsis of the movie. A former child star torments her paraplegic sister in their decaying Hollywood mansion.
Trigger warnings for this movie include psychological and physical abuse. There's nothing like horribly graphic throughout the movie. There's just a lot of psychological trauma type stuff.
Now, as you can see on our Instagram and Twitter, that this movie has an interesting poster. Mm-hmm. So it has one tagline that reads, "Sister, sister, oh so fair, why is there blood all over your hair?"
So spooky.
It's very terrifying. Included at the bottom of this poster, you can see that it has some things you should know about this motion picture before buying a ticket.
Firstly, if you're a long-standing fan of Miss Davis and Miss Crawford, we warn you this is quite unlike anything they've ever done.
Second, you are urged to see it from the beginning.
Third, be prepared for the macabre and the terrifying.
4, we ask your pledge to keep the shocking climax a secret.
And lastly, when the tension begins to build, try to remember, it's just a movie. For the time, though, this must have been very scary.
Yeah, I bet it was.
I was afraid of this when I was a kid, so... Of course, it's kind of impossible to talk about this movie without talking about the famous feud that is Joan Crawford and Bette Davis. So we're going to be talking about that as well as some of the backlash that they both faced in their own personal lives after the success of this film, as well as some of the behind the scenes of the movie itself.
I would say some of the things they said about each other in real life are just as cruel as the things said in the movie. They really hated each other.
They really hated each other. And depending on what you believe as far as the books go, which we'll talk about, both their daughters who wrote books about them, it just sounds like they're just shitty human beings, possibly all around. Who knows?
The success of this movie spawned a succession of horror thriller films featuring psychotic older women. This subgenre is actually called psycho-biddy movies or hagsploitation films.
Hagsploitation. I love the psycho-biddy subgenre, though. That idea is hilarious.
Some of these movies include Dead Alive, Mommy Dearest, Straitjacket, and some people consider Hereditary one of them. You can definitely see how this movie inspired a lot of movies like Flowers in the Attic, Misery, and basically is one of the first in the captivity horror Subgenre? Yeah, I guess it'd be a subgenre.
Because this movie is really scary. Like, not only is she wheelchair bound, but she's up on the second floor with no way to get down unless someone literally carries her.
Yeah. It's like the, what's the movie we just watched on Hulu that we hated? But
Run.
Mm-hmm. It's like Run.
Yeah, with Sarah Paulson.
Who's Sarah Paulson?
The one from American Horror Story.
Oh, yes. She's the mom.
Yeah.
Yeah. That movie was not good, but it was a creepy premise because that's based on the Gypsy Rose
Right.
real life event. But you can see how this movie inspired so many.
Definitely. And it's interesting that it's definitely the first showing that like wheelchair captivity aspect.
Yeah, or like in Misery, how she finds him in the car and then breaks his legs. The movie is terrifying, but you can definitely... We were sitting there watching this because this was actually the first time I had seen it, and I was like, oh yeah, Misery, definitely, yep, from this. 100%.
Yep. And just like jumping ahead a little bit, but just like the reliance that Joan Crawford's character has on Bette Davis that just gets so exploited, like with the food, like she can't fend for herself, she can't go outside. Like it's definitely a really scary premise.
Yeah, especially because, as you said, she can't go down the stairs herself. So the manipulation where, she brings her a rat and
the bird.
Or her own bird. That is so freaky about this movie. Those scenes, because she goes to clean. Oh, she's such a bitch.
She's horrible. They're both horrible.
Bette Davis's character.
Bette Davis plays Jane, and Joan Crawford plays Blanche.
Yes, and so Jane cleans Blanche's bird cage and says it flew away, but then later brings it as her dinner. Just opens it up. And you're dead, bird.
Yeah.
Damn. Smart, though. Really definitely freak people out.
Yeah, one of the other things that I find really scary about this movie that like it surprised me even when we watched it is that voiceover where Jane, when she's on the phone, it's like, oh, she can do a perfect impersonation of Blanche, but it's so freaky because it's just her recording over her talking. But I wonder if we can post a clip of that somehow because it's spooky.
Yeah, we'll post a clip of it.
We'll find it on YouTube or something.
Yeah, because there's actually a fun behind the scenes of that Bette Davis couldn't actually... They tried to have her...
Yeah, you can tell that it's absolutely not her voice. Yeah. Like, it is Joan Crawford.
But Bette Davis tried
That's
to do
hilarious because their voices are so drastically different.
Oh, yeah. They're not even close.
Yeah.
The budget on this film was so limited that the production wasn't able to use the usual process for Jane's driving scenes. Bette Davis actually had to do her own driving around Hollywood, with cameraman Ernest Haller perched either in the back seat or over the front fender in order to get the driving shots.
Which I saw a video of this and it is hilarious. There's a clip where she's pulling out of the garage and it's just literally like a piece of plywood that's affixed to the front hood of the car and the little camera guy is just like hunched over. And that's exactly how they got the shots like front facing of her driving. Was she just drove really slow and he stayed on that little perch and recorded her.
But yeah, this would have been crazy because 1960s cameras, they were big. And, nowadays usually... it's like green screened. Or even back then, it was just like projection.
Right.
And if it would have been too expensive, she just would have had to drive around. But it's so funny to have like such a big star at the time.
driving her own car,
the car. There's actually a quote by Bette Davis in 1987 saying, "I smile when I remember the first time Jane drove down Beverly Boulevard in an old Hudson. The expressions on the faces of people in other cars when they saw me were hysterical. Lots of mouths dropped."
It would be wild to see, like, I think she technically was like an A-list celebrity, B-list celebrity at this point, just driving around.
Yeah, that'd be so funny to see. It's like, I mean, not the same thing, but like when I was walking around downtown and I was like, holy shit, that's Tony Hawk.
Yeah.
Just saw him walking around because they opened up that skate park downtown.
Or do you remember, too, Jason Momoa has a friend that lives in Ferndale, so he just has been like around occasionally, and people have like just fucking follow him around while he's driving.
People post pictures and alerts. He's here. You can see it on Facebook all the time.
I never want to be a celebrity.
No, but
leave me alone.
People do that. Like people are just obsessed, and there wasn't Facebook in 1960 when they were shooting this, but it would be the talk of the town, I bet.
Joan Crawford demanded a body double for the scenes where Jane attacked Blanche, claiming that she needed stitches after Bette had kicked her in the head. And there's varying accounts of whether or not this is true, but when we get a little bit more into the feud, it's kind of funny to think that she actually was kicking her this hard.
I bet that she did.
I bet she did. Because in retaliation, Joan Crawford started carrying weights in her pockets so that when Bette Davis had to move her around because she's wheelchair bound, it was harder for her. And apparently Bette Davis also had back problems, and she would continually mess up the scenes that Bette Davis had to move her again and again and again until she was like in agony. It's horrible.
They're so extra. They're both so
horrible.
I can't even imagine that. Because the production crew definitely wouldn't, the director wouldn't have let her do that.
Right.
If he had known. So that means she's sneaking in weights.
Yeah, it's wild.
Where did she keep them? In her pockets? On her...
She must have.
In
her coat
ankle
or
weights?
Something? Yeah.
She just put... I imagine her under her dress and coat just wearing weights.
There's a lot of quotes from both of these women about each other that we're going to kind of sprinkle throughout, I think. But I think here is fitting. This is a quote from Bette Davis.
I think this is the worst one, and it's a good one.
This one? The second one. I was going to do the second one.
Oh, yeah. No, okay. Not the worst one yet, but this one
this is a bad one, too.
It's still a bad one.
The best time I ever had with Joan Crawford was when I pushed her down the stairs and whatever happened to baby Jane.
I feel like the hatred between the characters in the movie was real. You could just feel that they hated each other on a real level.
Yeah.
There's
books about this now, about the two of them.
Yeah, because especially from Jane's perspective, she slams doors in Blanche's face. Yanks the phone from her. You just feel an extra layer. Or when she's ripping the, because she does she have tape over Blanche's mouth, or is it?
Yeah, when she has her confined and tied up.
Tied up. I feel like she was probably extra rough with her on purpose.
I think that they really did hurt each other.
I bet that I can guarantee you they did.
That's what I mean about the stitches. I found varying, yes, it's true, no, it's not, but I'm just choosing to believe that it's probably true.
I'm sure it is true. An interesting tidbit about Bette Davis for this movie is that she created her own makeup for the role. Director Robert Aldrich said it closely matched his idea for the character's grotesque makeup. Because throughout the movie, it's way over the top.
Yeah.
She has 3 times the makeup on that she should. And it really says a lot about her character.
Yeah.
Because she's such a diva and thinks
she draws the little heart on her cheek.
Yeah, draws the little... Yeah, it's supposed to be a beauty mark, but it's a heart because she's so extra.
Yeah. She's so extra.
She's so extra. The director said, he was afraid to suggest that they get a professional makeup artist.
Right.
Because he didn't want to offend her. Unlike most of her Hollywood peers, Davis was actually unafraid to wear ugly costumes and makeup. Because she said it enhanced her performance.
That makes sense, and that's cool, too. I think, in this time period, it was hard for an actress to play, the ugly actress, so it's really cool that...
It was all about...
You know what I mean? Quote-unquote ugly,
looking your best. That even, going back to another episode, it reminds me, for some reason, of Creature from the Black Lagoon, where, I cannot remember the actress's name off the top of my head, but the main star, she had that swimsuit was specifically made for that movie. It did not exist anywhere else to enhance her features.
Yeah, it's insane.
The people, they just did that all the time. But they would, actresses, especially, 40s, 50s, 60s, it was all about the most expensive clothes you could find and looking your best, because if they didn't, I mean, I guess it's still like that today, but it could ruin your image to look bad.
Disheveled.
Yeah. Because I know Joan Crawford really struggled with that in this movie. Because she's supposed to look emaciated. And there's actually, I found an article talking about, like, Bette Davis talking shit about Joan Crawford because she had different, I forget the words she used, but basically bras, like push-up bras and stuff.
Oh, okay.
To make her look not as aged as she actually was, you know what I'm saying?
Perkier.
Perkier, yes.
That's the word.
But she had different ones, like, different extremes.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and like the scene where she's on the beach, like basically laying there dead, but she, you know, because she's like wet from the beach, so her clothes are clinging to her more. Apparently she wore like an extra stuffed bra on set.
That's very funny.
To hide her age more.
That makes sense. Because she also, like, I feel like Bette Davis looks her age in this movie, but Joan Crawford, in some scenes, she looks like she could be 25. And it's because of the way she's made up.
Yeah, she's definitely trying to hide it.
Yeah. Footage from the Bette Davis films Parachute Jumper and Ex-Lady, both from 1933, and the Joan Crawford film Sadie McKee from 34 were used to represent the characters acting when they show earlier reels. And there's that whole scene where Blanche is like watching her own movie on TV. So they were actual films that both the women were in when they were younger. I think you even said, you were like, wow, that looks just like her.
Yeah.
Like it is her.
Because I didn't realize that they had cut in
real movies.
Yeah. Movies that they had done when they were younger. Because when it showed it, I was like, wait a minute. I thought they were supposed to be like older in this. And then how come they're young here? Because they don't tell you. Because it's supposed to, the movie opens with them being kids.
Right.
And then it goes to this footage of them as adults, and I thought that was a part of the movie, so that then when it showed them older, I was like, oh, is this like aged makeup? What is happening here?
Right.
Because also, you know, I haven't seen all these 1930s Joan Crawford movies, so I didn't know. But it's done really well. I would say that it makes sense, like the editing, especially because even the Bette Davis footage it shows, later in the movie, Jane is like, yeah, this movie only did bad because of you, Blanche. Yeah. And they're referencing the exact scene that you watched earlier, which is really cool to see.
Another moment of ridiculous feuding and pettiness. When this movie was being cast, Davis only agreed if she could play the title role of Jane, and that she wanted confirmation from director Robert Aldrich that he was not sleeping with Joan Crawford. And the reasoning for this is that she didn't want her getting any extra close-ups or special treatment. Oh, it cracks me up. She's like, I'll do it, but I'm the lead, and if you're sleeping with her, I'm out. I love it.
One of the scenes I love most in this movie is the scene where adult Bette Davis, adult Jane, is singing that I've Written a Letter to Daddy song that she sings in the opening. Yeah, I even said aloud when we were watching it, I was like, oh no, you can't sing that as an adult.
No, you cannot.
It makes it so much worse. It's such a different context when you're 8.
I've written a letter to Daddy. His address is heaven above. I've written, dear Daddy, we miss you and wish you were with us to love.
But for this scene, they did a lot of smart filming here because across the room, there's actually a mirror. And the way that they lit Jane actually makes her look even older because there's a light coming from the top which is not how you're supposed to light,
Yeah.
especially an aging woman.
Highlights all those creases.
Yes, because it's specifically done to highlight creases and like any like what's it called?
Crow's feet.
Crow's feet under your eye. It's specific. You're supposed to do it like, especially.
It's like harsh light when it comes from the top.
Yeah, it's supposed to. You're supposed to do it like, at, like level with them or a little lower and like a nice soft light.
That was like a harsh flashlight, like on all of her wrinkles.
Yeah. So it just highlights it even more. And then especially because she starts to walk closer and closer to the mirror. And the mirror isn't like perfectly clean. So from a distance, she looks almost like she's younger. And then as she's getting closer and closer, you see, and she's looking at herself and she's like older and older. Man, that scene is just memorable.
Yeah.
But so creepy. And director Robert Aldrich said during the filming he had wanted to scream out loud. He said he had tears in his eyes and said to Bette Davis, "You just won yourself an Oscar."
Yeah.
Because, yeah, she does a great job, but I was uncomfortable.
Yep.
Going off of that last section, he actually said to her, "You won yourself an Oscar." But to actually have this movie, like, compete in the Oscars, because, you know, you can't just release a movie a week before the Oscars and get nominated, especially back then.
Yeah.
So they purposefully shot this movie in a month and then had the first draft and were showing people this movie in another month.
Interesting. Just so they could get it in time.
Yeah, which is insane, especially back then because, you know, nowadays, when we're done with this podcast, I can just take out my memory card and plug it right into my computer and it's good to go.
Yeah.
Back then, you know, you have to develop the film.
Right.
You
Takes a long time.
Yeah, you literally have to take your film out, make sure it came out. Then you gotta cut it and then glue it together. Then you have to take it to a projector to watch. And to do that in a month, that would be insane. And I'm sure, like, OSHA, well, they didn't have OSHA back then.
What
but,
is OSHA?
You know, basically to make sure workers aren't being abused.
Oh, gotcha.
I'm sure people were
You just
working.
said that so casually. I was like, wait, what's OSHA?
I'm pretty
I
sure
do know what that is.
people were working 24 hours
Yeah.
straight on this movie to get it done.
The movie was also a smash hit upon its initial release, recouping its original budget in just 11 days, eventually grossing $9 million.
Adjusted for inflation, this movie would have made around $72 million. The original budget was around $980,000. And I'm sure that went mostly to Joan Crawford and Bette.
Yeah, absolutely.
I bet. And you know what I bet happened too? I bet when they signed on, they were like, well, how much is she getting paid? I can almost guarantee that happened.
Right.
And I bet it was even more petty where they were like, as long as I get $10 more than her.
Or
I'll
like
do
50 cents
50
more.
cents, as long as it's more
Yeah.
than her. This movie is actually also on the list of Roger Ebert's best films, and it has a 4-star rating, which is the highest.
In the movie, also, the character of Lisa, who was Mrs. Bates' daughter, was played by Bette Davis's real-life daughter, B.D. Merrill. So this goes into the weirdness that both of their daughters wrote books about them. So the first one is Joan Crawford's daughter, Christina, wrote a best-selling tell-all book called Mommy Dearest that later became a movie.
Movie is terrifying.
It's really scary.
Eventually we'll do an episode on it because it is that scary.
Yeah. And she released this after Joan Crawford had died. The movie came out in 1981 and was starring Faye Dunaway, but it's really a tell-all about an unbalanced, alcoholic, abusive mother, which
The coat hangers.
yeah, the no more wire hangers thing.
Yeah, no more wire hangers.
I also saw that movie when I was very young, and it scared me a lot.
Yeah, and it's so scary. And her, like, the makeup she has on in that scene. Oh my gosh.
But obviously we don't know the truth, but this book has kind of been regarded as the truthful as far as how Joan Crawford treated her her daughter, who actually was her stepdaughter as well. I have a quote in a moment about that too. So that was so successful that later on, Bette Davis's daughter, B.D. Merrill, also released a tell-all book about her mother. However, this was met with a lot of criticism because it, according to her family and Bette Davis's other children, this was not the truth. And Bette Davis's stepson, adopted son, I can't remember, actually stopped talking to B.D. Merrill after the release of this book. And this was called My Mother's Keeper, which came out in 1985. And very much in the similar thread, it portrays Davis as an alcoholic, abusive mother.
Well, yeah, I haven't heard anybody... I've heard as many people denouncing Joan Crawford's portrayal as much.
Right.
And let alone with Bette Davis's family basically all denying it, but the daughter.
And the thing, too, with Bette Davis, with the book that her daughter wrote, her daughter released it like when she was essentially like dying. Like she was very sick. I don't know. I honestly don't remember what Bette Davis passed from, but she was like not in a position where she could even like defend herself. It was just very weird. It seemed like kind of like a cash grab for attention. Who knows? But I also found this very weird. But B.D. Merrill also became a minister later in life.
So and she's definitely a liar.
Yeah, and she wrote a few other
further approving that.
Yeah, and she wrote a bunch of other religious books. I found this interesting, though. This was one of the only quotes that was kind of positive between the two women, which was Bette Davis defending Joan Crawford after the release of Mommy Dearest. So I'm going to skim over this quote because it's kind of long. But she was quoted as saying, "I was not Miss Crawford's biggest fan, but wisecracks to the contrary, I did and still do respect her talent." Which, of course, too, that was one of the only things between the two of them that they ever gave each other praise on, was they both seemed to actually respect each other as artists and actresses.
I guess that's good.
Which is interesting. But, quote, "What she did not deserve was the detestable book written by her daughter. To do something like that to someone who saved you from the orphanage, foster homes, who knows what. If she didn't like the person who chose to be her mother, she was grown up and she could choose her own life," end quote. That was interesting.
Yeah, that's an interesting, defense of a woman she hated.
And, you were an orphan, just respect her, which is so old school.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I thought that was interesting. We are going to get into the feud between the two women, and the best way to start that off is with this quote from 1977. Bette Davis was quoted as saying, "You should never say bad things about the dead, only good. Joan Crawford is dead. Good." End quote.
Yeah, that's the worst one that I had mentioned earlier. Yeah. The feud between Bette Davis and Joan Crawford is actually so well known that Ryan Murphy, creator of American Horror Story, made a show titled Feud about it. There was an article that was released around the same time as the FX Feud show that Ryan Murphy created, and it kind of gave a timeline of where their feud seemed to come from and how it started and how it continued for literally decades. And literally half a century. Yeah. That's insane.
And this article that we're going to be talking about is from Harper's Bazaar, and it was written by Emma Dibbin, and this was published on February 22nd, 2017.
The origin of the feud began around 1933.
Joan divorced her then husband, which overshadowed Bette Davis's role that was coming up. Davis had reached a pivotal point in her career, and she's going to be the star of the comedy Ex-Lady. But at the same time, Joan Crawford announced her divorce from her then husband and pushed the announcement of this movie to the back of the paper. And Ex-Lady was actually dropped from theaters after a week thanks to poor ticket sales, and Davis apparently blamed Joan Crawford for this.
Yeah, again, they're just so extra. But this would have been a much bigger deal back in the 30s because divorce
was wild.
Wasn't a thing really back then. But especially because newspapers were such a big deal back then. You know, you don't see trailers on TV or on YouTube.
Yeah. And if your like movie announcement got moved to a little paragraph on the back page, it would have been very easy for people to not see it.
Mm-hmm. The next event that kept this feud going was in 1935. Joan Crawford actually marries an actor that Bette Davis was in love with.
It's unreal.
Davis was quoted as saying, "I have never forgiven her for that and never will."
And Davis was quoted as saying that her co-star Franchette Tone, who she starred in the drama Dangerous with, she, quote, fell in love with Franchette professionally and privately. Everything about him reflected his elegance from his name to his manners, end quote.
Unfortunately, Crawford got to him first, and the couple would announce their engagement during the filming of the movie. Davis said he was madly in love with her. They met each day for lunch. He would return to the set, his face covered in lipstick.
I love it. And this quote further down from Davis, "She took him from me. She did it coldly, deliberately, and with complete ruthlessness."
Oddly enough, though, Davis did go on to win an Oscar for her role in this film. And the feud would only continue from here, continuing into 1936. About a dress?
Mm-hmm. At an Oscars ceremony, Davis didn't expect that she would win, so she wore a plain navy dress. And Crawford threw some shade at her, saying, "What a lovely frock." In 1943, Joan Crawford attempted a truce when she signed on to Warner Bros. And she had the dressing room adjacent to Davis. And for weeks and weeks, she sent Davis gifts of flowers and candy, all of which were returned. Of
course. In 1945, Crawford took a role that Davis had turned down.
And then won an Oscar for it. In 1952, Davis played Joan in a movie. There was a falling out with Joan Crawford and her long-term friend Catherine Albert. And so in retaliation, Albert wrote this movie about a washed-up actress clinging desperately to her fading star power, which obviously was a dig at Crawford. And Davis immediately decided to take this role and played her.
And as we mentioned before, in 1962, they did Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. And we kind of, briefly touched on that before, where Davis agreed to sign on to the movie if she was the title, and, asked specifically that the director not sleep with Crawford.
Yeah.
But yeah, on this set was the most legendary of the feud. It even went as far as Joan Crawford was on Pepsi's board of directors, so Davis had a Coke machine installed in her dressing room.
So petty.
This continued into 1963, where, as we mentioned before, the movie was rushed so it could make the next Oscars. And during this Oscar ceremony, there was some more drama. Joan Crawford actually ran a campaign against Davis so that she wouldn't be recognized for her acting. Crawford even went as far as to go on the stage herself to announce the Best Actress of the Year.
Oh, she didn't announce it. She collected it.
Yeah. Crawford.
Yeah. So what happened was some of the nominees for Best Actress were not going to make it. So Joan Crawford said she would take the place of this other actress who was projected to win. And so when she did, Joan Crawford ran up there and accepted the, the prize for Best Actress, even though, of course, she didn't win it, but neither did Bette Davis. But there's all of these photos of her holding the Oscar, and it was not for her.
It was actually for actress Anne Bancroft.
And those photos are hilarious because Joan Crawford looks so proud of herself, and it's literally not her fucking award.
We'll post a picture.
The last person I want to ask you about is the lady with whom, in many minds, you are forever linked. That's Joan Crawford.
I know, isn't it incredible? We're forever linked. We made one film. It's funny that remained. Well, it was a good movie. It was a good movie. As far as making the film with her, she was on time. She knew her lines. She basically was a pro. But we're very different kind of women, very different kind of actresses. Yes.
But afterwards, how would you characterize your relationship?
Came when she saw to it I didn't get the Oscar for Baby Jane. She went to all the New York nominees and said, if you can't get out there, I'll accept your award. And please do not vote for her. She was so jealous. She was a fool, my dear. We had a great percentage. If I had won that Oscar, we'd have made $1 million more on the film. That's what always happens. So she wasn't very smart about what she did.
You hurt by the memory of that?
I was furious because that would have made me the first person with 3. And as you know, I always have to be first as an Aries. Yes, and I should have had it all. Very immodest of me. I should have had it for that year, no question.
Apparently they were going to do a kind of spiritual successor to whatever happened to Baby Jane, and it was a title called Hush, Hush, Sweet Charlotte. And Joan Crawford ditched it.
Yep. She said after a week and a half she was unwell, but in fact it seemed like she was still reeling from what happened on the set of What Happened to Baby Jane.
Their feud continued until Joan Crawford passed away in 1977, and I don't think we need to read that quote again.
No.
It just never ended. Mm-hmm. The two never forgave each other.
Yep, so Joan Crawford died in 77, and then in 78 was when Mommy Dearest was published.
It's one thing for two movie stars to not like each other, or two people that work on the same movie to not really get along, but this is just another level.
Yeah.
We never go into a movie expecting 90% of the behind the scenes to just be about how they hated each other.
Yeah.
They went out of each other's ways to ruin each other's career.
Which, well, more power to them. They really stuck with it.
They never gave up.
There are multiple books about them, as well as the show. There's a lot of different things about them. So if this is a story that interests you, there's a lot of information out there about it.
In this movie, there is one on-screen death, and she really did not deserve it. She was just trying to help.
Yeah. R.I.P. Elvira.
Jane kills Elvira with a hammer, I think. Jeez. Hits her in the back of the head. That's right, yeah, she's just trying to help.
Yeah, she's trying to free Blanche. Yep.
Just hits her with... And then, because then there's the whole, Jane freaks out and was like, no, I had to do it. It's like, you're crazy. She's so crazy.
Yeah.
Don't worry, Miss Blanche. I'll get you down from here. I know, Miss Blanche, I know. You just rest easy.
And because you assume in the end that Blanche survives, and so just the one death. Yeah. And the bird.
I think you do assume that Blanche survives. At least I do from the ending, because they do get her.
Yeah.
But
I think she survives as well.
I think she does.
Just Elvira.
Yeah. You can watch this one on HBO, and I'm sure you can rent it for a couple $2 everywhere else. It's a long movie, but it's definitely worth watching. It's slow to start, like all older movies are, yeah.
Classic 40s, 50s, 60s, where there's just a lot of exposition and just build up. But we actually put watching it off for a while
because it's 2.5 hours long.
It's 2:15.
Yeah. So
it's like 10 o'clock. We're like, okay, we're gonna watch a movie, and then we're just like, 2 hours 15. Yeah, I'm not going to bed at midnight. But I'm really happy we watched it. It was actually very good.
For next week, we're going to be talking about the 1992 horror movie Candyman.
I'm so excited for this. I love Tony Todd.
Yeah, we do love Tony Todd.
And I love Candyman. We've watched this movie a lot.
And we just ordered the special edition Blu-ray, and it'll be here on Tuesday.
But with this movie, we're really hoping that the new remake can come out, and we can kind of do a future comparison of the two, which would be really exciting because it's a A24 film. So just from the trailers alone...
Jordan Peele, right?
I believe he's the producer. Okay. I don't think he's the director. But it looks really, really good. There's just something about bees in a hook hand that really get me.
Oh my God. All right. That's a good time to end.
I just love Tony Todd. It's just so unique. It's just not a guy walking around with a hatchet or a possession or a. It's so unique, and it just
Bees
feels
and a
like
hook hand. Birthday present ideas.